Welcome back to the Stick Figure Historian channel, guys. In our last episode, we talked about Jean de Montereul, the French diplomat sent to Britain by Cardinal Mazarin. And we know that Montereul was stretching things with his grandiose promise of Scottish protection and support, but King Charles didn't. Perhaps he would have been more cautious if the circumstances were not so dire. But with Fairfax and Cromwell cutting off more modes of escape from Oxford with every passing minute, we can understand the pressure he was under. The king wrote to Montereul that he accepted the promise, and resolved to make his way to the Scottish army at Newark and throw himself upon their mercy. The French priest set off on his merry way to bear the tidings north, leaving Charles to make hasty preparations for departure. In order to avoid detection, he would take only 2 traveling companions. John Ashburnham was his first choice. Jack, as Charles fondly called the man, was a favorite courtier of his, whose mother was actually a relation of George Villiers, the unfortunate Duke of Buckingham. Michael Hudson, a staunchly loyal chaplain, was the king's second pick. Hudson would act as a guide, since he was familiar with the territory they needed to cross. At midnight, April 27th, the king came to Ashburnham's room. It was the night they were going to leave. Nearly everything was ready. They even had a fake pass to get through the Roundhead army lines if they were stopped and questioned. One thing remained. As you may know, kings generally love to have portraits painted of themselves. And Charles was no exception to this. Actually, he was a bit of an extreme example. He didn't just have one, he had at least 12 portraits. And one of these paintings even showed his head from 3 different angles. But now his vanity was backfiring. Because if almost everyone in the country knows what you look like, it's not going to be easy to get around without being noticed. The king was going to need a really good disguise. Ashburnham was just the man for the job. He hadn't served for years as the king's personal groom of the bedchamber and learned nothing. And just so you know, a groom of the bedchamber is a kind of personal servant to the king. He does many different things, but one of those is to help the king dress. First, Ashburnham took out a pair of scissors and clipped the sharp point off the king's beard, turning it flat and stubby. Then he attacked Charles' hair, cutting off several inches of his dark curls. This done, the king exchanged his royal robes for a servant's costume, and to complete the outfit, Ashburnham clapped a funny-looking fur cap on his head and thrust a little suitcase in his hand. Charles left that room no longer as King of Britain, but simply as Harry, Mr. Ashburnham's servant. Hudson joined them now, and the 3 adventurers took a sad secret farewell of their close friends, before galloping through the gates of Oxford and into the perils of enemy territory. Instead of heading straight up to Newark, they decided it would be more prudent to travel east first, towards London, and then take a sharp turn for the north after that. Their fake Roundhead Pass was an integral piece of this plan, for the story they had concocted was that Hudson was a Roundhead captain coming to do business in London. Whether Charles would actually ever go to Newark, however, was a matter not yet settled. You see, the king actually had a few potential plans open. His preferred destination, at the moment, was none other than London. Yeah, shocking as that may sound, it was indeed the case. Charles had been sending letters back and forth with Parliament for the past few weeks, trying to make a deal with them to get back on the throne. So far, it had not been going particularly well, much like any other conversation he ever had with them. They were making a lot of demands, and he wasn't willing to compromise on much. He was still waiting for a reply to his latest letter from them, and he wasn't surprised when he never received it. It soon became clear that London was not an option. After a wild journey of several days, passing through 14 enemy garrisons and filled with night riding, the party stopped at Downham Market, a location they felt was safe from any curious eyes. Here Hudson left Charles in Ashburnham and went on to Newark alone, to give the Scots notice of the king's coming. But Charles still had one last plan up his sleeve. If he didn't like the news that Hudson brought back from the Scots, then he would make for the nearest seaport and try to find a ship to take him to the continent. The Scottish army officers were a bit flabbergasted at Hudson's arrival. They had heard something about the king negotiating with their politician countrymen down in London, but they weren't exactly expecting this to happen. They weren't sure if they wanted to take the responsibility of his safety. If they took him in, it was sure to cause trouble with Parliament. Did they want that kind of trouble right now? This really put them in a tricky fix. Charles, their king, a Scot, was reaching out to them for help in a dire situation. Loyalty and, honestly, self-interest won out in the end. They reluctantly agreed to accept his surrender and protect him. Montereul scribbled their agreement down, with a few little tweaks of his own to make it sound a lot less reluctant, and sent it back to Charles with Hudson. Charles scrapped his mainland European escape plan, convinced now that there really was a chance he could make it out of this mess on top, and plans were made in earnest for the completion of the journey. With the danger being what it was, the king and his two companions decided it would be prudent to change his disguise for this last stretch. The Roundheads knew by now that he had escaped from Oxford, and were sure to be on a sharp lookout for him. And since the king had stayed for several days in the area, there had been plenty of time for suspicious people to start spreading rumors. Ashburnham's servant Harry suddenly vanished, and a new man dressed like a churchman appeared, answering to the simple name of Doctor. He was supposed to be Hudson's tutor, which was really quite funny as Charles was only 5 years older than Hudson. Not a very large age gap between a student and his teacher. On May 5th, 8 days after Charles had escaped Oxford, Covenanter General David Leslie had the uncomfortable honor of greeting the king and accepting his surrender. He and many of the other Scots pretended shock at the ordeal, but that was mostly to make it look to the English Roundheads as if the thing had been forced upon them. King Charles was now officially a prisoner of his own people. Oh, and here's just an interesting fact for all you genealogist nerds like me out there. Charles was actually surrendering to a distant cousin here. He and David Leslie shared a common great-grandfather in James V, King of Scotland. Kind of strange to think of. Anyway, that's enough for now. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for episode 41.